Haddon Springs was a Midwestern town where every road curved toward the square with a maple leaf fountain. On Friday evenings, wind from the cornfields carried a faint sweetness onto wooden porches, rattled wind chimes, and dissolved into the laughter of college kids coming home for the weekend. At the corner of Maple and 3rd, the Carter's house at 214 stood like an old friend. Brown shingle roof, a wide porch with a swing, and a bed of yellow chrysanthemums Lydia Carter tended every morning. Avery and Harper Carter, 19-year-old twin sisters, had been born at the end of September when the town changed color. They looked so alike that teachers at Haddon Springs High had to memorize the tiny mole near Harper's lip and the strand of blonde hair that always fell across Avery's forehead to tell them apart. But people who knew them would say they were two doors that opened in different directions. Avery was outward-facing, quick as a breeze that flips a page. Harper was quieter, the type to tie her laces carefully before a long run. That year, they were freshmen at a community college 15 minutes away. They lived at home to save money, commuting in the used Honda Civic their dad, Mark Carter, a cabinet maker, had gifted them. They picked up shifts at the Blue Sparrow coffee shop, where the glass door reflected the whole sky. The party was a late summer bash in a converted barn on the Fisher property outside Haddon Springs. String lights hung like fallen constellations. Indie music floated in with the chirp of insects. Avery got pulled into a dart game next to Ben Alvarez, the new guy in town, also 19, working part-time at the electronics store. Ben had a smile that made the day feel sunnier. Harper, in a pale blue sweater, talked with Caleb Rhodes, the boy from the neighboring class in high school, now an auto tech at the trade school nearby. No one thought a warm night, humming with promise, could draw a line between chapters of a life. There was no reckless sprint in this story, only young adults making decisions in a moment that felt like there'd be a lifetime to revise. They thought they knew themselves, each other, and the roads ahead. They thought. A month later, it drizzled in Haddon Springs. Avery counted days on her phone app, her heart heavy as a water-soaked leaf. She quietly bought a test at the corner store on the way home, slipped it into her coat pocket like a secret with a shape. In the upstairs bathroom, where the mirror hung a little crooked because Mark kept saying, "I will fix it," and had not yet Avery watched two pink lines tilt into view like reflections on water. She drew a breath deep into her lungs, then leaned against the door and stared at the patch of chipped paint on the ceiling. All the sounds of town felt far away, the corn holler, the neighbor's dog, her mom calling her dad to dinner. Avery laid a hand on her flat stomach, both stunned and scared, as if hearing a new backbeat tapping into her life, one she was not ready for anyone else to hear. That night she asked Harper to walk the loop around Willow Lake, the way they always did when something serious needed saying. Under the swaying willow branches, Avery told the story quickly, as if stopping would make the words fall into the water and disappear. Harper listened without interrupting, fingers laced tight. She looked out at the black, deep surface where raindrops made widening rings, like whispers. "Harper," Avery rasped, "I do not know what to do." Harper meant to say something steady. But when she looked at Avery, saw their shared eyes, made different by worry, she exhaled. "Maybe," she said softly, "maybe you should tell Ben." Avery nodded. Then Harper stared at her own Converse and bit her lip. "Avery, I am late too." The sentence fell like a light leaf and echoed huge inside Avery. Silence stretched, full of frog calls. "You are kidding." Harper shook her head, with a sideways smile that was not a smile. "I have not tested yet, but I have a feeling." They did not hug right away. They stood in the rain, letting the surprise, fear, and strangeness sketch a new map in their heads. Then Avery held out her hand. "Tomorrow," she said, "we will buy one for you. Not alone." The next morning, in the slightly crooked mirror bathroom, Harper saw 2 pink lines. Time slowed. The bracelet's second hand, the leaf outside the window. She sat down, arms around her knees, and breathed. From downstairs, the Sunday smell of pancakes drifted up like always. Everything was normal in the strangest way. They decided not to tell Mark and Lydia just yet. "We need a plan," Harper said, pulling out a grid notebook and drawing columns: budget, insurance, doctor, mental health. Avery nodded. This was the Harper she knew, the one who could turn panic into bullet points. They met Ben and Caleb at the park by the football field, told it piece by piece, halting but clear. Ben stared at Avery for a long moment like he was slotting new pieces into the picture. Then he took her hand, silent, and said, "I am here." Caleb, a man of few words, rubbed the back of his neck, looked Harper in the eye, and said simply, "I will do my part, whatever it is." For weeks the twins became artists of camouflage. Baggy sweaters, decaf lattes, more online classes. They secretly looked up an OB in the next town, the one Lydia always mentioned, Dr. Naomi Brooks, her high school best friend. "Mom will find out if we see her," Avery worried. "But no one's better," Harper said. "And I want the truth from someone Mom trusts." They scheduled midday appointments, pretending to add extra shifts at Blue Sparrow. Dr. Brooks's office was bright and warm, its walls hung with sunflower fields. Naomi greeted them with a soft smile, tight curls pulled back, a voice that made shoulders drop. There was no judgment in her eyes, just professionalism and a real care set on questions like, "What is your support network, school plans, financial situation? How are you feeling?" Avery laughed a little, hoarse, like a tangled mess. Naomi nodded. "A mess is a shape. We will loosen one strand at a time." 3 months after the party early winter, Lydia texted, "Family meeting after dinner, 8 p.m. The family chat was called Carter & Co., with a hammer emoji Mark had picked. Avery and Harper sat close on the couch, hearts thudding like a school drum. Lydia stepped out from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a floral apron. She stood by the mantel where family photos lined up, the twins in their graduation dresses, Mark smiling with crinkly eyes, Lydia hugging a crate of flowers. She drew a breath and smiled, half nervous, half glowing. "We have news," she said, looking at Mark, then the girls. "I am. 10 weeks. The room went still. Mark's eyebrows shot up. Then a laugh burst out like a nail under a hammer. "We are having a baby again." He squeezed Lydia's hand, and Lydia looked at her daughters, waiting. In their mother's eyes, Avery saw a starry sky and the worry of being an older mom at 40. Avery glanced at Harper. They had a script for lots of scenarios: Mom finding prenatal vitamins, Dad questioning overlapping shifts, but not this one. Some moments in life do not give you a postponement option. Avery stood, her knees a little shaky. "Mom," she said, her voice lighter as if a stone lifted from her chest, "we have news too." Harper rose beside her and took her hand. She recounted the sequence, slow and clear, taking the timeline. Ben, Caleb, Dr. Brooks, the morning sickness, the budget spreadsheet. Her last sentence was so small you had to lean in to catch it. "We are sorry we hid it." A storm passed through the Carter living room that night. Mark sprang up. "You are only," he caught himself. They were 19. He clenched his fist, then let it go. Lydia was just a mom for a beat, responsibility dropping on her shoulders like a weighted blanket, 2 pregnant daughters, and she herself pregnant. She sat down, her hand shaking in Mark's. "Why did not you tell us sooner?" she asked, not as a verdict, but like opening a door. Avery's voice snagged. "We did not want to ruin your good news. or disappoint you right now of all times." Harper added, "We did not know what to do, but we are not hiding anymore." There was anger. There were tears. There were pauses heavy as boulders. Mark paced, muttering, "Oh Lord," then stopped at an old picture of two little girls frosting a cake. Lydia pressed a palm to her forehead, then to her belly. At last she said, "Tomorrow I am calling Naomi. I do not want you going through this alone." The office shone brighter the next day, with snow reflecting daylight. Lydia came with Avery and Harper. Mark waited in the car, saying he needed a walk to cool his head. Naomi hugged Lydia like the old friend she was. "We will figure this out," she promised. In the consult room, Naomi talked numbers and skin schedules, nutrition, fatigue, sleep. Then she spoke of the harder thing, how shame is like fog, and how light gets through when you tell the truth. "No one can prep for every twist," she said, "but we can prep for each other." Lydia squeezed her daughter's hands. "I need a few days to breathe, but I am here." Avery felt an anchor drop to the lake floor. Harper, the list maker, reopened her phone's spreadsheet budget, insurance, doctor, mental health, and added a new column, family. Naomi wrote down a support group at the community center, the number of a college advisor who worked with student parents, and a website for campus resources. She reminded Lydia, "You have to care for yourself too." Healthy parents help the kids hold on. Lydia laughed. "They're going to call me Mom Squared." Winter wrapped Haddon Springs in a thick blanket. The Carters learned new rhythms, tired mornings, appointments, crisp phone calls that stayed sharp without turning mean. Ben drove Avery home from classes to the clinic. He learned to listen and how to brace his shoulder when the car hit a pothole. Kayla cut shifts at the shop to take Harper to prenatal yoga at the community center. He waited outside the door, tapping a pocket, eyes softening every time she came out. Mark built a crib from maple, his hands reading grain like an old book. He made not one, but 3 maybe, because sometimes your craft knows before your brain does. Lydia cooked meals full of calcium, iron, and folate, like solving a math problem on the kitchen counter. One night she looked at Mark. "If someone had told me this last year, I would have laughed and said it is too dramatic. But now, it feels like a 3-part song, exhausting, messy, and strangely harmonious." Harper sat at her desk, writing a lit paper, "When Stories Branch." She used Frost's woods as a metaphor for roads you can't unchoose, and for learning to live with a choice without punishing yourself for having made it. Avery kept a journal, each page starting, "Today I feel," practicing naming her emotions. In March, the wind whistled through the doorframes. Lydia's belly grew alongside Avery's and Harper's 3 curves in a row. In the twins' mirror, 3 silhouettes overlapped like a collage. They argued over names. Avery wanted long a sound sage cadence. Harper preferred calm meanings June Mara. Over a warm evening, Lydia and Mark laughed as the girls debated like they were picking paint. "You know kids bring their own names, right?" Mark said. "Whatever we choose, they will make it theirs." Naomi organized a meetup for young families at a little church hall by the creek. On the long table sat peanut butter cookies and lemonade. People shared stories that never matched exactly but pulsed with the same beats. The first night home, the clumsy diaper swap that ended in laughter, the tears you shed when you hear your baby breathe. For the first time, Avery and Harper did not feel like outliers. They were 2 people in a bigger circle. Of course, there were stormy nights. Avery woke from a dream in a panic, lost in a warehouse of diapers, every aisle ending at an empty register. She sat up shaking and crying. Lydia came in, like she had an antenna tuned to every anxious frequency in the house. "Breathe with me," she said, hand on Avery's back. "In for 4, out for 6. When her daughter's breath steadied, Lydia told her about carrying the twins, the fear of not being good enough, of breaking something forever. Then I learned, she said. Motherhood is not a graded test. It is a long chain of mess up a little, learn a little, love more. Harper had her own night. She and Caleb fought about schedules, about savings, about small things like a shirt Caleb left on a chair. You are carrying too much, he said too loudly, startled by his own voice. Harper, exhausted, looked at him. We are both carrying too much, she answered. They sat in silence until Caleb reached for her hand. I will learn, he said, feeling it was the hardest, truest promise he would ever made. In spring, Avery deferred some in-person classes until after delivery, focusing on online coursework. Not dropping out, she told her advisor. Changing pace. Harper kept a full load because she knew she needed the rhythm of school to keep from sinking into chaos. Ben picked up full-time summer hours at the store, taking night shifts so he could drive Avery to appointments by day. Caleb landed a paid apprenticeship at a bigger garage. None of them knew the whole future, but for the first time, instead of one giant foggy blob, each person clutched a small, solid piece and could say, "This is mine." Lydia and Mark made choices too. Lydia took unpaid leave a few weeks before her due date. Mark turned down a big cabinetry contract to be home more. Money's tight, he said, penciling numbers on a page, but we will make it. This house got through the '08 layoffs, your granddad's pneumonia, and the drought of 2012. We will get through this. July split open like a ripe peach. Avery, Ben at her side. Lydia, holding her hand, went into labor on a morning full of light pressing through thin curtains. She remembered Naomi's words. Picture a wave, let it pass through you. You do not have to fight or run. She did, contraction by contraction. When the first cry rose, Avery laughed through tears. Ben leaned his forehead against hers like two climbers who'd crested a long hill. They named the baby Cadence Avery's pick because every day with her was a new rhythm. Through the nursery glass, Mark watched Cadence wiggle her fingers like a tiny conductor waving an invisible string section, and he sighed with relief and wonder. A week later, Harper delivered. They named the boy Milo, a soft name like a petal. Caleb cradled him, eyes wet and unashamed. I thought I did not know how to hold him, he stammered to Harper. But I think Milo knows how to hold on to me. Harper smiled, the edges of her fatigue beautiful in a new way. Because he trusts you. August burned bright. Lydia went into labor for the third time in her life. People say the third is easier. For Lydia, it was technically the smoothest and emotionally the most complex. She heard the heartbeat layered with nurse footsteps and Mark's faint whistle, his way of calming himself. When she held June Harper's favorite name Lydia, realized she had become a mother to a newborn at the exact moment her daughters were new mothers themselves. In rooms down the hall, Avery and Harper were learning the same songs. The 3 a.m. calls for clean bottles, the off-key lullabies, the heavy-eyed joy. Naomi stopped by with a small bouquet of sunflowers. A full chorus, she teased, Cadence, Milo, and June. Fall returned. At 2:14 Maple, baby noises wove into the soundtrack. June's sleepy grunts, Cadence's bird-like babble, Milo's giggles when Caleb made a goofy face. On the clothesline, tiny onesies fluttered like victory flags after long days. The kitchen calendar bloomed with notes, Cadence second shots, Harper support group, Lydia postpartum check, payday Ben/Caleb, Avery philosophy group work. Sometimes the crying overlapped, and someone had to step onto the porch for air. Some nights the kitchen light burned with Lydia warming bottles, or Mark quietly carving wooden name plaques for each crib. Then there were afternoons when the whole house napped, the wall clock ticking to an audience that did not care, sunlight laying a thin blanket across the floor. At the community center, Avery volunteered at the Young Moms group, holding babies so the mothers could finally drink a hot cup of tea to the last sip. Harper started a book club called Literature and Choice, talking with classmates about women who walked through storms and learned to name themselves afterward. Ben finished a short HVAC course, hoping for a raise. Caleb began feeding a glass jar on the shelf labeled Milo's first bike. Lydia went back to her part-time job at Leaf and Lantern, the little bookstore she loved. She adored the smell of fresh pages and the way people cocked their heads to choose a book like testing out a temporary life. Mark signed a new cabinet job and, in the evenings, taught Caleb to plane boards while Caleb showed him features on the new drill. Grown-ups were learning, too. One winter night, after Cadence had started babbling da-da, and Milo was pulling himself up on the coffee table, Avery asked, "Mom, are you still mad at us?" Lydia looked at her grown daughter, cradling a baby 2 generations nested in one image. "Sometimes I am mad," she said honestly. "Mad about what you have to carry at your age. But anger and love do not live on opposite sides. Love does not demand we forget every wrong. It asks us to go forward together through them." Harper nodded from the other chair. "I think I finally learned how to forgive myself. That was harder than I expected." Caleb rested a hand on her shoulder, quiet. Mark, a man of few words, added, "I have built 3 cribs. The first, I tried to make perfect. The second, I built fast. The third, I stopped and measured a lot. I have learned what can warp, hands can tire, and a baby won't care about a crooked joint. They need a safe place to sleep. Families are like that, too." Exactly a year after that summer party, Haddon Springs hung lights for the fall festival. On the porch at 214 Maple, Lydia hung 3 little wreaths, each with a name: Cadence, Milo, June. On the lawn, blankets spread, and a basket overflowed with spare wooden blocks Mark had made. Cadence crawled after a softball, her baby hair catching the sun. Milo stood wobbling, arms out, grinning every time he fell into Caleb's arms. June, the youngest, lay in a porch bassinet blinking at the sky, as if counting dew. Avery brought out a tray of apple pie that smelled of cinnamon. Harper set a pot of chamomile tea on the table and tugged June's blanket up. Ben tweaked the Bluetooth speaker to play Cadence's favorite bounce along tune. Caleb adjusted Mark's old camera, ready to click the family photo. Naomi arrived with another bouquet of sunflowers. She took in the scene like a painter stepping back to see the whole. "If anyone asks me what a happy ending looks like," she said, "I would send them to this porch on a day like today." "Not an ending," Lydia laughed. "Just a good chapter." They lined up for the photo, left to right Caleb, holding Milo, Harper leaning into him. Mark with an arm around Lydia, June's bassinet between them. Ben with an arm around Avery, while Cadence tried to yank her mother's hair tie. Off camera, the town fountain did not show, but everyone knew it was there, water still rising and falling like the town's heartbeat. Caleb pressed the shutter. The soft click was a period closing one sentence and opening the next. In the picture were imperfect seems a chip on the porch rail, a sagging light string, a milk stain on Harper's shirt. Still, it was beautifully ordinary. 3 babies, 3 smiles, 6 open arms. At dusk, when the porch lights flicked on, Avery and Harper sat shoulder to shoulder the way they always had, back when they did not know what to call each other besides sister and best friend. "If someone had told me a year ago, it would be like this," Avery said, trailing off. Harper smiled, watching Cadence doze on her sister's shoulder. "I would have told them to dial down the drama," Harper finished, "but maybe life writes better than we do." Avery nodded. "It is strange," she whispered. "The things I feared most did not vanish. They turned into what I do every day, with the people I love." From inside, Lydia called. "Dessert time?" "Tiny army," Mark joked, "and milk. 12 gallons in the fridge, I swear they drink like a football team." The sisters laughed, stood up and walked toward the light. On the porch, 3 bassinets swayed in the breeze slow, sure notes, and somewhere far off, a wind chime tinkled. Haddon Spring slept a soft sleep, holding all the weariness and the peace of a family that had just finished learning a hard song. Tomorrow, the rhythm would begin again, crying, spoons against mugs, laughter, sighs, mom, dad, sis, baby. 3 heartbeats, growing day by day in a wooden house at Maple and Third, where love was not perfection, but persistence.